Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of the United States, passed away at the age of 99. The world has lost not only a former president but also a remarkable humanitarian, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and tireless advocate for global peace and human rights. Carter's passing was confirmed by his son, Jimmy Carter III, affectionately known as Chip, in a statement to the Washington Post on Sunday. According to reports, he passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by his family, which served as a poignant reminder of the man's dedication to his loved ones throughout his life. At the time of his passing, Carter was the longest-living former president in U.S. history, having surpassed the previous record set by George H. W. Bush. His remarkable longevity, combined with his ever-present sense of duty to the world, made him a figure whose legacy would endure long after his time in office had passed. In February 2023, Carter entered hospice care after a series of health setbacks, including several hospital visits that kept him out of the public eye. His health had been declining for some time, a reflection of the toll that age had taken on the former president. His grandson, who provided updates on Carter's condition during this time, shared that the elder Carter was no longer able to stay awake for entire days. Yet, even in his final months, Carter's spirit remained unbroken. He was still able to crack jokes and share moments of joy with his family, highlighting the warmth and good humor that defined much of his life. As he reached the final stages of his life, Carter's family stood by him, ensuring that his final days were filled with the love and comfort of those closest to him. His grandson noted that Carter's home in Plains, Georgia, served as the place where he spent his last moments, surrounded by familiar faces and the peaceful atmosphere of the town he had always called home. In a truly heartfelt moment, President Joe Biden shared that Carter had personally asked him to deliver his eulogy, a gesture that spoke volumes about the bond the two men shared. Carter, who had always been a voice of diplomacy and measured thought, was known for his relationships with other world leaders, including Biden. The former president's decision to entrust Biden with the responsibility of speaking at his funeral was a reflection of his deep admiration for Biden and his belief in the continuity of democratic ideals. Throughout the past few years, Carter had faced a series of health challenges, including a cancer diagnosis in 2015. Despite these trials, Carter's perseverance never faltered. He fought through a broken hip in 2019 and underwent a procedure that year to relieve pressure on his brain caused by internal bleeding resulting from a fall. These struggles were emblematic of Carter's resilience, but they were also a reminder of his mortality. As the years passed, the world watched as this aging icon, who had once been a symbol of youthful idealism, grappled with the inevitability of time. Carter's path to the presidency was as unique as his tenure in office. A Georgia native through and through, Carter's political journey began in the state Senate in the 1960s. It was there that he first began to make his mark as a leader with a commitment to justice and progress. In 1970, he was elected governor of Georgia, where he quickly earned a reputation as a man of principles, someone willing to challenge the status quo. His inaugural speech as governor in 1971 would go down in history as one of the most powerful moments in Georgia's political history. Carter declared, "The time of racial discrimination is over," a statement that defied the segregated status quo and set the tone for the remainder of his career. Carter's opposition to segregationist policies in Georgia came at a time when many in the South still clung to the idea of a racially divided society. Despite the resistance he faced, Carter's vision of equality and opportunity for all people, regardless of race or class, remained steadfast. His words were a challenge to the segregationists who had once supported him, marking the beginning of his advocacy against discriminatory practices. As governor, Carter became a symbol of progressive change in Georgia, but it was his decision to run for president that would ultimately cement his place in history. Carter's bid for the presidency in 1976 seemed unlikely at first. He entered the race as a virtual unknown on the national stage, but his campaign quickly gained momentum. His integrity, untainted by the scandals that plagued other political figures, made him an appealing option for voters seeking a change from the status quo. By the time the 1976 Democratic primaries concluded, Carter had secured his place as the party's nominee. In the general election, Carter faced off against the incumbent President Gerald Ford, who had taken office after Richard Nixon's resignation in 1974. Despite Ford's political experience and visibility, Carter's message of hope, renewal, and ethical leadership resonated with voters. On November 2, 1976, Carter emerged victorious, winning the presidency in a closely contested election. His campaign had struck a chord with Americans who were disillusioned by the scandals of the Nixon era and eager for a leader they could trust. Carter's victory in 1976 came just weeks after an infamous Playboy interview in which he made a statement that would become a defining moment in his political career. In the interview, Carter confessed, "I've looked on a lot of women with lust. I've committed adultery in my heart many times." While the remark was controversial at the time, it now seems almost quaint when compared to the scandals that would later follow other politicians. Carter's honesty, while criticized by some, reflected the kind of authenticity that endeared him to his supporters. Taking office in January 1977, Carter's presidency was marked by both accomplishments and challenges. His administration was shaped by significant economic difficulties, including rising inflation and unemployment, as well as the energy crisis, which put a strain on the nation's resources. Yet, despite these challenges, Carter's foreign policy successes would go on to define his legacy. One of the most significant achievements of Carter's presidency came in 1979, when he brokered a historic peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. Camp David Accords, as they came to be known, ended decades of war between the two nations and marked a monumental step in Middle Eastern diplomacy. Carter's persistence and diplomacy in bringing together Egyptian President Anwar el-Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin earned him worldwide praise. Peace treaty not only changed the course of history but also made Egypt the first Arab nation to officially recognize Israel. It was a victory for peace and diplomacy that remains one of Carter's greatest accomplishments. Despite these successes, Carter's presidency was also defined by crisis. The Iran hostage crisis, which began in November 1979, cast a long shadow over his final year in office. The seizure of 52 American diplomats and citizens by Iranian militants, who had stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, left the nation on edge and dominated the news cycle. Carter's inability to secure their release during his presidency became a key factor in his loss to Ronald Reagan in the 1980 election. In the aftermath of his presidency, Carter would go on to have an even more significant impact as a global humanitarian and advocate for peace. Through the Carter Center, he worked tirelessly to promote human rights, prevent disease, and improve global health. His work earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002, solidifying his place as one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. As the world reflects on the life of Jimmy Carter, it is clear that his legacy is one of profound service and devotion to others. His commitment to justice, human rights, and peace transcended political boundaries and left an indelible mark on the world. Even in his final days, Carter remained a symbol of grace and humility, a man whose life was dedicated to helping others, whether through his presidency, his philanthropic efforts, or his unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity. Jimmy Carter's passing marks the end of an era, but his contributions to the world will live on. His legacy, shaped by his values of compassion, integrity, and peace, will continue to inspire generations to come.